In Solo Leveling, after Jinwoo's meeting in America came to an end, something terrifying happened inside the Korean Hunter Association. Gunhee was alone in his office when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His heartbeat began racing, and his hands started trembling uncontrollably. At first, he assumed it was simply exhaustion or the effects of old age. After all, a doctor had once warned him that the stress from his work would take his life within a few months. Yet somehow, he had managed to live for 2 more years. Then his phone rang. It was his wife, calling to ask why he still hadn't come home. But before he could finish speaking, the call was abruptly cut off. At that instant, Gunhee sensed that something terrible had happened. He looked out the window, only to discover that the city had vanished. Beyond the glass was nothing but endless darkness. Then he noticed someone calmly sitting on the sofa across the room. Gunhee hadn't sensed the stranger's presence at all until the being released its aura. The moment he felt it, he realized this was no ordinary human. The mysterious figure behaved as though he had only come to have a conversation, but Gunhee could feel an overwhelming power far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The creature calmly formed a shard of ice in its hand and said, "I've cut off all communication with the outside world." For a brief moment, Gunhee wondered if he was trapped inside a nightmare. Then, without warning, a spear of ice pierced through his shoulder. The wound froze instantly, leaving no blood behind. The monster looked at him with contempt and said, "Do you still believe this pain is just a dream? In the end, you're only human." At that moment, Gunhee realized the horrifying truth. This creature held nothing but absolute hatred and contempt for humanity, and launched his attack on Gunhee. He demanded that the ruler inside Gunhee reveal himself, saying he had no interest in wasting time fighting an old human. Without warning, he fired a small blast of icy energy. In an instant, it erupted into a massive explosion, filling the entire office with freezing fog. Then, through the darkness, 2 glowing golden eyes appeared. Gunhee had finally awakened his true power. He effortlessly blocked the monarch's attack and redirected the force, blasting through the office wall. But beyond it, there was nothing but endless darkness. The Frost Monarch had already trapped them inside a separate dimension. As golden energy surrounded Gunhee's body, the monarch revealed that he had already eliminated several ruler vessels before, and Gunhee would be his next victim. The battle erupted immediately. The Frost Monarch summoned enormous walls of ice, but Gunhee smashed straight through them with overwhelming strength and charged forward without hesitation. The monarch struck back, driving an ice spear through Gunhee's shoulder and freezing his entire arm solid, but Gunhee shattered the ice with raw power and continued fighting. Every collision between them sent violent shockwaves across the dimension, making the entire space tremble. As the battle dragged on, Gunhee's old body began to reach its limit. His breathing grew heavier, and he realized he had only one opportunity left. Gathering every last bit of his remaining strength, he unleashed one final attack. He suddenly dropped to his knees. His body had finally reached its absolute limit. The Frost Monarch looked down at him with complete disrespect. "So, this is the true power of the fragment of brilliant light? How pathetic." In the next instant, he vanished. Before Gunhee could react, the monarch appeared right in front of him at terrifying speed and drove an ice spear straight through his chest. The spear pierced completely through his body. Yet even then, the Frost Monarch continued mocking the ruler within him, claiming that the world would fall long before the rulers could ever arrive. But Gunhee refused to give up. He grabbed the ice spear with all his remaining strength, preventing the monarch from pulling it free. Then he looked directly into his eyes and said, "Did you really think I fought you without a plan?" Those words caught the Frost Monarch completely off guard. Even as he stood on the verge of death, golden energy continued leaking from Gunhee's broken body. Then, without warning, he unleashed a massive fireball. The attack flew past the Frost Monarch and crashed into the wall behind him. The Frost Monarch laughed, convinced Gunhee had wasted the last of his remaining power. Even Gunhee's own hand was badly burned by the attack. He wasn't trying to hit the monarch, he was trying to shatter the dimension imprisoning them, and he succeeded. A crack opened, and through that opening, one creature escaped, a black ant. At first, the Frost Monarch paid it no attention, believing the battle was already over. But the moment he sensed the aura lingering around the ant, his expression changed instantly. He realized it was one of the Shadow Monarch's soldiers. Gunhee had sent it to summon help. The Frost Monarch immediately rushed to kill it before it could escape. He formed a massive ice scythe and swung it down with overwhelming force. But just before the blade connected, the ant vanished. At that exact moment, the Frost Monarch's body suddenly froze in place. Or rather, he was forced to stop. Someone had appeared directly in front of him and caught the ice scythe with one hand. It was Sung Jinwoo. A terrifying black aura exploded throughout the entire dimension. Before the Frost Monarch could even react, Jinwoo grabbed him by the throat, pulled him closer, and coldly asked, "Who exactly are you?" The crushing grip nearly snapped the monarch's neck, and he instantly realized the horrifying truth. The one standing before him was the Shadow Monarch himself. Jinwoo quickly noticed that this enemy looked almost identical to Baruka from the Red Gate, but his presence was on an entirely different level. Without warning, the Frost Monarch released a massive wave of freezing energy. Jinwoo narrowly dodged the attack, but his entire arm was instantly froze in ice. Even then, he calmly summoned the Demon King's daggers and shattered the frozen arm with ease. Then something completely unexpected happened. The Frost Monarch openly admitted that he couldn't defeat Jinwoo by himself. Instead of continuing the fight, he smiled and said, "I think saving that human matters more to you than fighting me." At first, Jinwoo didn't understand what he meant. Then he looked up and saw Chairman Gunhee with a massive hole through his chest. The Frost Monarch created an enormous ice spear, looked straight at Jinwoo, and said, "Choose. Fight me, or save that human." The spear shot toward Gunhee like a missile. Jinwoo immediately tried to stop it using ruler's authority, but the spear was overflowing with mana. For the first time, his power failed. Without a second thought, he sprinted after it at full speed. At the very last moment, he caught the spear with his bare hands and forced it off course, sending it crashing into a nearby building. The rage in Jinwoo's eyes was impossible to hide. Meanwhile, the Frost Monarch opened a gate to escape, but just before disappearing, Jinwoo summoned his fastest dagger and threw it toward escaping Monarch. The blade struck the Monarch in the back. For the first time, the Frost Monarch felt real pain. He couldn't believe that a human vessel had actually managed to wound him. Before stepping through the gate, he turned back with one final mocking smile and said, "I left you a gift back there. Feel free to add it to your army." At that moment, Jinwoo was furious that he had allowed that monster to escape. But the instant he turned around, his rage vanished and was replaced with pure horror. Chairman Gunhee was lying on the ground, covered in blood. Jinwoo immediately realized that his wounds were far too severe for ordinary healing. Without hesitation, he shouted for Baru. The Ant King tore through the sky at incredible speed and landed beside his master in seconds. Jinwoo gave only one command: save him, no matter what it takes. Baru immediately began using every healing ability he had. But for the first time, even Baru looked helpless. He had never encountered injuries like these before. Desperate, Jinwoo pulled out his final elixir of life. He didn't know whether it would work, but he was willing to try anything. Just then, the chairman gently stopped him. He was barely breathing. Slowly opening his eyes, he looked at Jinwoo and quietly said, "Thank you for coming." Jinwoo begged him to hold on just a little longer so they could take him to a hospital, but Chairman Go simply smiled. "Neither magic nor medicine can save me now." Then he spoke about the future, about the war that was coming, and about the powerful enemies Jinwoo would soon face. As he spoke, his condition continued to worsen. Even Baru exhausted every last bit of his healing magic, but nothing worked. Finally, Chairman Go spoke his last words. "Soon you'll have to choose between humanity and something else. Please. Choose humanity." Looking at Jinwoo with complete trust, he continued, "I wish I could have lived long enough to fight beside you, but it seems this old body has finally reached its limit. Even so, I can leave without regrets, because the future of this world is in the hands of a young man like you." His vision slowly faded. His voice grew quieter. Then, his hand fell lifelessly to the ground. For the first time since becoming the Shadow Monarch, Jinwoo cried.